Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges, Part 10, December. A single lamp there stood beside the heap, and shed thereon its mocking golden light, such as might tempt the weary eye to sleep, rather than prick the nerve of tasked sight. Yet Psyche, not to fail for lack of zeal, with good will sat her down to her ordeal, sorting the larger seeds as best she might. When lo! upon the wall a shadow passed of doubtful shape across the chamber dim. Moving with speed, and seeing nought that cast the shade, she bent her down the flame to trim. And there the beast itself, a little ant, climbed up in compass of the lustre scant, upon the bowl of oil ran round the rim. Smiling to see the creature of her fear so dwarfed by truth, she watched him where he crept, for mere distraction telling in his ear what straits she then was in, and telling wept. Whereat he stood and trimmed his horns, but ere her tale was done resumed his manner scare, ran down and on his way in darkness kept. But she intent drew forth with dexterous hand the larger seeds, or pushed the smaller back, or light from heavy with her breathing fanned, when suddenly she saw the floor grow black, and troops of ants, flowing in noiseless train, moved to the hill of seeds, as over a plain armies approach a city for attack. And gathering on the grain began to strive with grappling horns, and each from out the heap his burden drew, and all their motion live struggled and slid upon the surface steep. And Psyche wondered, watching them, to find the creatures separated kind from kind, till dizzied with the sight she fell asleep. And when she woke, 'twas with the morning sound of Aphrodite's anger at the door, whom high amaze stayed backward, as she found her foe asleep with all her trouble o'er. And round the room beheld, in order due, the piles arranged distinct and sorted true, grain with grain, seed with seed, and spore with spore. She fiercely cried, "Thou shalt not thus escape, for to this marvel darest thou not pretend. There is but one that could this order shape, Demeter, and I knew her not thy friend. Therefore another trial will I set, in which she cannot aid thee nor abet, but thou thyself must bring it fair to end." Thereon she sped her to the bounds of Thrace, and set her by a river deep and wide, and said, "To east beyond this stream a race of golden fleeced sheep at pasture bide. Go seek them out, and this thy task, to pull but one lock for me of their precious wool, and give it in my hands at eventide. This do, and thou shalt have thy heart's desire." Which said, she fled and left her by the stream. And Psyche then, with courage still entire, had plunged therein. But now of great esteem her life she rated, while it lent a spell wherein she yet might hope to quit her well, and in one winning all her woes redeem. There as she stood in doubt, a fluting voice rose from the flood. "Psyche, be not afraid to hear a reed give tongue, for 'twas of choice that I from mortal flesh a plant was made. My name is Syrinx. Once from mighty Pan into the drowning river as I ran, a fearful prayer my steps for ever stayed. But by that change in many climes I live, and Pan, my lover, who to me alone is true and does me honour, I forgive. Nor if I speak in sorrow is it my own. Rather for thee my voice I now uplift, to warn thee plunge not in the river swift, nor seek the golden sheep to men unknown. If thou should cross the stream, which may not be, thou couldst not climb upon the hanging rocks, nor ever, as the goddess bade thee, see the pasture of the yellow fleeced flocks. Or if thou could, their herded horns would gore, and slay thee on the crags, or thrust thee o'er, ere thou couldst rob them of their golden locks. The goddess means thy death, but I can show how thy obedience yet may thwart her will. At noon the golden flocks descend below, leaving the scented herbage of the hill, and where the shelving banks to shallows fall, drink the rippling water one and all, nor back return till they have drawn their fill. I will command a thorn bush, that it stoop over some ram that steppeth by in peace, and him in all its prickles firmly coop, making the seizure of his golden fleece. So without peril of his angry horns shalt thou be quit, for he upon the thorns must leave his ransom ere he win release." Then Psyche thanked her for her kind befriending, and hid among the rushes looking east. And when noon came she saw the flock descending out of the hills, and lo, one golden beast caught in a thorn bush, and the mighty brute struggled and tore it from its twisted root into the stream, or ever it was released. And when they watered were, and gone, the breeze floated the freighted thorn where Psyche lay, whence she unhooked the golden wool at ease, and back to heaven for passage swift gan pray. And Hermes, who was sent to be her guide, if so she lived, came down at eventide, and bore her thither ere the close of day. But when the goddess saw the locks of gold held to her hands, her heart with wrath overran. Most desperate thou, and by a betting bold, that dost outwit me, prove thee as I can. Yet this work is not thine, there is but one of all the gods who could the thing have done. Hast thou a friend too in the lusty Pan? I'll give thee trial where he cannot aid. Which said, she led her to a torrid land, level and black, but not with flood or shade. For nothing could the mighty heat withstand, which aye from morn till eve the naked sun poured on that plain where never foot had run, nor any herb sprung on its molten sand. Far off a gloomy mountain rose alone, and Aphrodite thither pointing said, There lies thy task, out of the topmost stone of yonder hill upwells a fountain head. Take thou this goblet, brimming must thou bring its cup with water from that sacred spring, if ever to my son thou wouldst be wed. Saying, she gave into her hands a bowl, cut of one crystal, open, broad, and fair, and bade her at all hazard keep it whole, for heaven held nought beside so fine or rare. Then was she gone, and Psyche on the plain now doubted if she ever should regain the love of Eros, strove she howsoe'er. Yet as a helmsman at the word to tack swiftly without a thought puts down his helm, so Psyche turned to tread that desert black, since was no fear that could her heart overwhelm. Nor knew she that she went the fount to seek of cold Cocytus, springing to the peak secretly from his source in Pluto's realm. All night and day she journeyed, and at last came to the rock, gazed up in vain around. Nothing she saw but precipices vast, over ruined scarps with rugged ridges crowned, and creeping to a cleft to rest in shade, wherever the desperate venture she essayed, she fell asleep upon the stony ground. A dream came to her thus: she stood alone within her palace in the high ravine, where nought but she was changed, but she to stone. Worshippers thronged the court, and still were seen folk flying from the peak, who evermore, flying and flying, lighted on the floor. Hail, cried they, wife of Eros, adored queen. A hurtling of the battled air disturbed her sunken sense, and waked her eyes to meet the kingly bird of Zeus himself, that curbed his swooping course, alighting at her feet. With gentle motion his far darting eye in kindness dimmed upon her, he drew nigh, and thus in words unveiled her foe's deceit. In vain, poor Psyche, hast thou hither striven across the fiery plain, toiling so well. Cruelly to destruction art thou driven by her whose hate thou canst not quit nor quell. No mortal foot may scale this horrid mount, and those black waters of its topmost fount are guarded by the horned snakes of hell. Its little rill is an unleaping jet of cold Cocytus, which for ever licks earth's base, and when with Acheron 'tis met, its waters with that other cannot mix, which holds the elemental air dissolved, but with it in its ceaseless course revolved, issues unmingled in the lake of Styx. The souls of murderers in guise of fish scream as they swim therein, and wail for cold their times of woe, determined by the wish of them they murdered on the earth of old, whom each 5 years they see, whenever they make their passage to the Acusurian lake, and their release may win from pains condoled. For if the pitying ear of them they slew be haply pierced by their voices spare, then are they freed from pain, as are some few. But for the most again they forward fare to Tartarus obscene, and outcast thence are hurried back into the cold intents, and with new company their torments share. Its biting lymph may not be touch'd of man or God, unless the fates have so ordained. Nor could I in thy favour break the ban, nor pass the dragons that thereby are chain'd, didst thou not bear the sacred cup of Zeus, which for thy peril lent shall turn to use, and truly do the service which it feign'd. Thus as he spake, his talons made he ring around the crystal bowl, and soaring high descended as from heaven upon the spring. Nor dared the horned snakes of hell deny the minister of Zeus that bore his cup, to fill it with their trusted water up, thence to the King of Heaven therewith to fly. But he to Psyche bent his gracious speed, and bidding her to mount his feather'd back, bore her aloft as once young Ganymede, nor ever made his steady flight to slack, ere that he set her down beside her goal, and gave into her hands the crystal bowl, unspill'd over brimming with the water black. End of part 10, recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com.